Welcome to the Let's Talk DRR series number 5 on disaster risk reduction for heritage sites, natural and cultural heritage, biosphere reserves, and geoparks. For moderators and speakers, please turn on your video. Yes? Okay. We are happy to let you know we already have with us Mr. Sufyan Aslam of Inspire Alliance as today's moderator. Along with the 3 prominent resource persons, Dr. Bingwei Tian, Associate Professor of the Institute for Disaster Management and Reconstruction, IDMR, Sichuan University, the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. And then Dr. Tanot Unjah, Research Fellow at Institute for Environment and Development, Lestari. And then Dr. Sashi Suzuki, Coordinator Japan Fund in Trust, Unesco Jakarta Office, UNESCO Office Jakarta. Please monitor the announcement in the Zoom chat on how to ask questions, to fill in the attendance form, and other information related to the topic. Well, without further ado, I would like to give the time to Mr. Sufyan Aslam and our resource person to start the Let's Talk DRR. Mr. Sufyan, the time is yours.
Thank you very much, Ms. Iviana, for that introduction, and welcome to everyone joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you are. Thank you very much for spending your time in joining this DRR conversation. So for those of you who are just joining us for the first session, this is the 5th in the series of webinars. And so if you have missed and would like to listen in on the previous 4 discussions, you can view the videos on our YouTube page and also the UNESCO Jakarta Facebook page. So for those of you who are interested to listen in on the series, I really encourage you to do so. We have had very wonderful conversations during the past 4 or 5 weeks. So as mentioned by Ms. Iviana, today the topic will be on disaster risk reduction for heritage sites. And when we're talking about heritage sites, in the context of UNESCO, it always includes both natural and cultural heritage, biosphere reserves, and geoparks. And so we have today with us 3 very prominent speakers, very experienced speakers who have worked in this area for their careers, who have a lot of experience, which I think is very valuable to share with the audience. And I'm sure I have listened in to the previous conversations where we've had, and I find their experiences very, very, very interesting. And so we shall begin with the first speaker, which is Ms. Sachi. Now, Ms. Sachi, as mentioned by Ms. Iviana, you are the UNESCO office Jakarta. You work for the UNESCO office in Jakarta as the Japan Funds and Trust. Though I believe ever since the COVID pandemic, you have been back in Japan rather than Jakarta. So it's been a very interesting long holiday, I guess. Could you share with us, what drives you to work with the UNESCO office, and also for some of the audiences who may not understand or may not know the role of the officer, Japan Fund and Trust officer, perhaps you could, tell us and share your experience on having both positions.
Thank you very much, Sufyan, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to be here with you all. I joined UNESCO after I finished my PhD study on post-disaster recovery process. It was about how multiple stakeholders can collaborate together to recover the housings. And also I experienced 2011, the Great East Japan and earthquake and tsunami. And the tsunami hit my town, and that was very shocking experience to me. And through those studies and also my experience of disaster, I became to be involved in disaster recovery projects in Japan. Even as a time as a student, my contribution was really tiny, but it was great to learn from the meetings and how the projects proceeded. So at the time, I gained an idea that it's really important to properly involve experts, engineers, scientists in a disaster management process. And that's how I encountered UNESCO, which is stressing science policy interface. And that's how I now work as a Japan Funds in Trust coordinator in Jakarta office. And in terms of my role, so the Japanese Funds in Trust have long history. It's more than 40 years, over 40 years. And these funds is to support the science projects in Asia and Pacific region, especially the water and environment and the ocean. And these funds traditionally supported establishment and maintenance of the experts networks and also capacity building of individuals and institutions. And as a coordinator, I support those projects. And that also include interdisciplinary project, which includes DRR. So that's how I would like to share a little bit of what's going on in our office as for the Heritage DRR as well. Thank you. Over to you, Sofian.
And Sachi, I understand you did your PhD in Sendai, right?
Yes.
So you are the best person to talk about Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. I also we are colleagues together in UInspire, and you are also part of UInspire Japan. So you are wearing both UNESCO and also UInspire Japan hats. So could you tell us more about for those of them who are listening for the first time? What is UInspire Japan?
Yeah, thank you so much for your question, Sofian. In Japan, the UInspire Japan was established almost a year ago. I was a founding member, and I was also directly involved as a UNESCO, but also this is a part of my kind of voluntary work. And this is a new network, and we have almost 30 people in this network. We discussed on like what could be the specific goal for the UInspire Japan, because there are a lot of UInspire chapters in Asia Pacific, but we have different contexts, different challenges. And for Japan, most of the young people already are involved in voluntary activities on DRR or have a position in university or working for government. So we just needed some platform so that we can exchange ideas and also produce a collaboration. So we decided our concept as Agora or Plaza, so that where people can just pass through, come in and go, but we still have interaction when we see each other. So that's our concept. And I also personally hope that this will help capacity building. In the Sendai framework discussion was held in 2015. At the time, there was a children and youth forum as well. And I was also a part of the coordinating team of that forum. At the time, I wished that more and more Japanese youth to have their own words to express their experiences. So that's what I hope for UInspire, to open the door to the international community and also help capacity building. Thank you.
You brought up very, very good points, especially the part for multidisciplinary discussion and also the need for youth involvement, both of which we will talk about in the later parts of the discussion. So next, I would like to introduce the second panelist, Dr. Bingwei Tian, who is an associate professor at IDMR. And he had a very interesting experience of being in Kathmandu after the 2015 earthquakes in Kathmandu. Professor Tian, so just to introduce yourself to all of the speakers for today, could you explain what is IDMR and what is its role and what do you do in your research?
Okay, thank you very much, Sophia. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to be here talk with you. So I'm an associate professor worked in IDMR. So IDMR stands for the Institute for Disaster Management and Reconstruction, which is an academic entity jointly established by Sichuan University and the Hong Kong Polytechnic University, with an initial generous donation of 200 million RMB from the Hong Kong IDMR was officially opened on May 8, 2013. It is dedicated to comprehensive research, education, and service provision on all aspects of disaster risk reduction, response, recovery, and reconstruction. It welcomed its first class of master students in fall 2011, and currently has 137 students registered in our master and PhD programs.
It sounds like a very, very big campus, and I understand that the work that you guys do there are very good in terms of disaster management. So you mentioned that your big area is on big data science, disaster risk mapping, and interdisciplinary disaster research. Could you tell us briefly to those of audience who are listening, what does that mean? What do you do? And what drives you to work on this field?
Okay, thank you very much for the questions. I think it was started from 2008. On May 12, 2008, a heavy shake and dust fell down to my computer when I was writing my master thesis at Chengdu Institute for Mountain Hazards and Environment, Chinese Academy of Science. As you all know, that it was a winter earthquake, which caused nearly 90,000 people died or went missing. So the topic of my master thesis was about the DRR technology of a small watershed in Min River in Sichuan province, which is a main river basin I will talk about today, because there are 4 water heritages and frequently earthquakes in the basin. Although I had been doing research related to landslide, river flow, and other land disaster for 3 years during my master period, I didn't realize that it was an earthquake at the first time. This experience of being unable to judge a disaster situation touched me a lot in the late disaster study. Because of a spirit of rumors of water pollution after the earthquake and people's panic about the lack of information after the earthquake, the streets were full of people running for waters. Later, we knew that some people jumped from the building and died. This sense was deeply imprinted me in my mind. I can never forget it. That was the origin of my determination to do disaster research. As a young scientist majored in geographic information systems and remote sensing, immediately after the earthquake, I joined the team of remote sensing investigation of the Bear Lake in the extremely serious disaster areas. When I first saw the devastated areas on remote sensing images, tears comes out. Countless landslide, clamps, and widespread of road blockages. So the dangerous Bear Lakes were virally interpreted from the remote sensing images. I worked light by light without getting tired. The number of victims and the problems arising from the disaster response. I'm stuck in the constant thinking. What else can we do? In the months after the earthquake, I visited the disaster areas twice, almost all of the winter earthquake areas, with teams from Chinese Academy of Science and disaster remote sensing experts from Chiba University in Japan. So the earthquake damage sense touched me more than the remote sensing images did. The post-disaster depression and the sand atmosphere made it hard for me to let it go. Communication with Japanese experts made me understand the earthquake-prone country Japan and the current situation of the research. The professional observation instruments and equipment brought by the expert made me decide in 2009 to go to Japan for further study on disaster knowledge. In particular, in 2011, I was studying Tsukuba. I experienced the magnitude 9 earthquake and saw the Japan's response to the earthquake at site. It made me more firm on the road of disaster research. What I'm talking is the history that how I started the research of DRR and finally make it the main work of what I'm doing now. So in 2015, after getting my PhD degree from Kyoto University, I returned to Chengdu and joined IDMR. That means I make DRR as my lifelong career. I'm now especially working on disaster education and disaster risk communication through the big data mapping and the interdisciplinary approach. For example, we started a DREAM program in 2016. DREAM is the abbreviation of disaster reduction, ecological, and artistic map. The DREAM was applied in community and the campus-based disaster reduction and education. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for sharing that your experience, and I'm sure as someone who I'll be honest, I've never experienced an earthquake before. Not that I'm complaining, but I think if you've experienced something that big and you don't really understand what it is and what you should do, that will definitely leave a big imprint in your life experience, and will that will shape you for the years to come. And I like that you brought up the point that what can people do, because I think a lot of the times disaster risk education is about teaching people what should they do and how should they react in terms of the disasters. So we will continue that discussion after this. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Tanot, who is a fellow at Lestari UKM, and she is also a head of geology and landscape at the Langkawi Research Center, so located at Langkawi. So Dr. Tanot, your background is on conservation geology. So I think when people talk about geology, I think conservation is not the word directly that people relate to geology. It's not the first thing. For the listeners for the audience who are interested, perhaps you could explain what conservation geology is.
Thank you, Sofian. It's a pleasure and honor to be part of these DRR talks. I would like to bring you to the ideas of conservation geology, which is what you said. It is uncommon among the geologists. Yes, true. It is very true, because when I started involved in this conservation geology, I discovered things. Not everybody accept the idea. Is it, why do you do conservation geology? Why don't you just do just a common practical geology, which be able to contribute to the economic and human being of the society? But I started to get involved in this conservation geology when I'm out of the university, that are recessions, and then my professor offered me assistance, a researcher, to his project on conservation geology during those time. So I jumped to that bandwagon and joined him. And so coincidentally, in which the faculty, not the faculty, the institute in which I work on, developed the ideas of nourish the ideas of conservation geology, encourage you to look into new ideas, because it is known as Institute for Environment and Development, or we call it Lestari Eco to Sustainable Development, in which established based on the ideas of the country to answer to the Rio de Janeiro Sustainable Development. So you imagine the people that I work with when I started my research on conservation geology are not geologists. They're mainly from different backgrounds, and we are embark on idea of sustainable development. So conservation geology is ideas of embarking into sustainable development. Although at the first, we are started by getting the definition. I bring you the definition, what it is ought to be, because these definitions I picked based on Professor Ibrahim Como, quoted in 2000. It is one of the branch of new geology, more like application geology, to provide a theoretical and systematic framework, either to characterize, classify, assessments, and a ranking of geological heritage sites. It is later expanded in which we call geotourism and geopark. It is a much bigger picture for conservation geology, for geopark and geotourism, which is more applications of geoheritage site that you have. And geopark is led by geologists in a way, but it is a work with a local community, initiated by the local community using the geoheritage site that we have. Yeah. So that is conservation geology as a whole. Yeah. You asked.
No,
Yes, back to you, Sophia.
that is a very comprehensive description of conservation geology. And I think for myself, somebody who probably is not familiar with conservation geology gives you a very good understanding of what it is. So I will continue the question with you, Dr. Tanot. As you are aware, so this session is on disaster risk reduction for heritage sites. And you work directly with the Langkawi geoparks. And like you mentioned, you work with the local community, you involve them, and also your experience working in Lestari being you are not you are the only geologist there, where other people are from other backgrounds. So my question to you is, how important is multidisciplinary interactions in disaster risk reduction, and why is it important for us to have disaster risk reductions for heritage sites? Perhaps you could answer those questions.
Thank you, Sophia, for that answer. Probably I will be focused on geopark per se in terms of my DRR. But I would say the significance of multidisciplinary in disasters, because disasters is not just one subject matter. It is impacted various people and various subject matters, the people, the plants, the animals, and as a whole, a community, a country. So how do we handle those things? That's why you need a multidisciplinary people to look into disaster, or particularly in this case, a geopark. I think it's more specific to geopark because in the case of conservation, geopark encompass culture, tourism, and the local community. I would say the RR in the geopark could be translated into three, I would say. First, in terms of that science, how do you translate them into a science? Science, I would say, science to actions. Science to actions in the way of you're having this, when you translated the science in terms of systematic of conservation geology, in which you have the scientific values, and in our case of geopark, the science are translated into finding what is significance to a geosite. And note that geosites are not just one that conserve the memory of the earth, which is either of climate change, either of disaster, or outstanding beauty, but encompass all. In this case, you might see in a geopark, there's a several geopark developed based on disaster. For example, in Japan, it's based on volcanoes or based on a landslide in another part of the world. Yeah. In Malaysia per se, since we didn't have much of that, DRR are mainly looking at this science in terms of to the sites of environmental sensitive area. Either they are due to flash flood, either they are due to sinkhole, or because Malaysia are free much from the bigger geohazards. But it's also in a way of DRR are very important. Secondly, in terms of protecting ecological value, we put it in this case, not just geological, but how it linked to ecological. I give you some example from the country, Malaysia. For example, protections of the longest quartz ridge in the country. It is not only protecting the highland area, which is prone to landslide, but also protecting a forest for water catchment, or protecting the city from airborne diseases by keeping it as a fortress to the city. And secondly, there's also a work that we work on protecting Jurassic limestone complex, which is the only Jurassic limestone complex in the country. It is not only a catchment area for the local community, but also ecological habitats for these red sun bear, IUCN red list sun bear, and the biggest flower in the country, Rafflesia, particularly represented one in Peninsular Malaysia. So the protections of conservations, not just for only the geology. In the case of applications in terms of geopark, DRR ought to be translated in terms of safety. In the case of geopark, either in the case of Langkawi, I also speak of geopark per se. It is in terms of you translate it into policy, in which all this DRR should be translated into the management plan of the geopark, either for the safety to the sites or carrying capacity or what to do when their disaster occur and what to prepare. You're not just preparing the people who visit, but also preparing the people who brought them there in terms of either they are tourist guide or they are the local people. In the case of geopark, if the area encompasses the community, how the community be prepared, how the community adapt themselves to the environment that they are. So that's how we see DRR in a geopark. In this case, either in the conservation area or in the touristic area or among the community within the geopark itself. So back to you, Sophia.
That is very good, and I really like your answer and the need for the community, the stakeholders, and the policymakers to come together in disaster risk reduction, because this is not something that can just be done by the geologists and also the policymakers. And so, moving on from that question, I would like to call upon Sachi. So, who is so working for UNESCO. The social part, the education part, the cultural part is a very big component of UNESCO. And I understand that you are involved with the heritage DRR for Heritage Sites Protection project at the UNESCO office in Jakarta. So probably you could follow up with what Dr. Tano has mentioned and explain to the audience what have you done, and what is UNESCO's role in disaster risk reduction for heritage sites.
Thank you very much, Sophia, for your important question. There are multiple units in UNESCO: the natural science, social science, and culture, education, and the communication, and all are actually related to DLL. But since I'm from science sector, I would like to explain how science sector have been engaged in this heritage DLL. Overall, for heritage DLL, it is important to incorporate disaster risk reduction to the site management strategy. And also it is important that the national and the local DLL strategy consider the heritage. And for the basis, there should be good understanding of risk. So UNESCO science stakeholders could also help some assessments of the risk at sites. For example, like a geologist can assess the landslide risk at the UNESCO heritage site. And also at the headquarter level, it's important to understand the overall how the sites are really exposed and how we are really prepared. So there was a study implemented at the headquarter level, and it says that among the responders, over 80% of the sites are exposed to at least one natural hazard. So it's really important issue for us to really understand what that hazard and exposures are. And in headquarter level, there are another program called Operandum, which is also focused on nature-based solutions. So I think it will be introduced in the next session of this DRR talk. But in Asia Pacific region level, in our office, we have been conducting assessment of disaster risk management activities in UNESCO designated sites in the region, which includes heritage site, but also biosphere reserves and UNESCO global geoparks. And this is ongoing initiative. We would like to work with some consultants from different countries to assess the disaster risk and preparedness, so that we will have a overall whole view of the region, like how much we are prepared and what are the challenges and what are the success stories. So, and also we would like to develop a pilot project based on that assessment, which could incorporate a multidisciplinary approach and also citizen science and also science communication. So that's what science sector do for the heritage disaster risk action.
I like the part that you brought up towards the end, which is on science communication, communicating disasters. And I think from experience, a lot of the times, the communication part is one of the most crucial part, because you can do all of your research, you can do all of your papers, understanding the disasters, but the communication part to your stakeholders and to the public is very important. And I understand that sometimes some people find that part a bit challenging. So how does your sector or how does your unit overcome the communication, or how do you take the approach for communicating your research?
So there are two aspects, and one aspect is to raise awareness among tourists, visitors of the sites, so that they are aware of the risk. So it could be, depends on sites, but we could prepare a sign to acknowledge that there is a disaster risk. And also you can plan a visitor's path to avoid the risky areas. Also, activities should be held in a safe place. So those precaution could be done in each site. And also another important aspect is disaster risk communication in terms of education. So each site, as Dr. Tanot mentioned, maybe geosites also have a lot of experience of disaster, and it can even teach the mechanism of the disaster. So we could utilize those geographical features to explain how the disaster happens and how you need to prepare for it.
That's very fascinating. So you're using the effects of the disasters as a way to teach people of what happened. That is, I guess, in a way, a very good communication and education method to prepare. So thank you very much, Sachi, for informing us about that. So now I'd like to move on to Dr. Tian. Just to bring up the point, I think Sachi mentioned that almost all heritage sites are exposed to at least one disaster. And I understand that China is one of the countries with the most UNESCO heritage sites in Asia. So from your experience, probably you could tell us, how is some of the success stories, some of the challenges that you have faced, in disaster risk reduction or disaster risk management for heritage sites.
Okay, thank you very much for the question, Sophia. Indeed, until the end of 2019, China has 55 UNESCO World Heritage sites. Among these 55 sites, 5 are located in Sichuan province, which my university located. So these include the Jiuzhaigou Valley, Huanglong National Park, Sichuan Giant Panda Place, and the Qinchen Mountain, together with the Dujiangyan irrigation systems and the Mountain Emei, including the Leshan Giant Buddha. They are all along the Min River, which is my master thesis research areas. At the same time, there were 4 earthquakes within magnitude higher than 7 occurred in the Min River region in the past 50 years. So there are lots of DRR research in the region. Here I gave an example of the latest Jiuzhaigou earthquake, which happened in August 8, 2017. Jiuzhaigou earthquake was a magnitude 7 earthquake, which heavily affected the Jiuzhaigou World Heritage. The earthquake killed 25 people, with 525 injured. After the earthquake, we proposed the Resilient Jiuzhaigou project. The main objective is to protecting the natural and cultural heritage in wilderness areas when promoting local and regional economic development. We construct a resilient evaluation framework for Jiuzhaigou. So first, within the park borders, we will work on building a smart park, addressing all aspects of park management, which will require coordination with many other partners and design a new and innovative data management systems. Working with Jiuzhaigou County also. So on data management of the tremendous flow of visitors on new and more efficient transportation systems, on strengthening the cultural aspect of tourism in the region, and on development of a new tourism site outside of the park, which can promote economic development in high impoverished continuous regions. Focus especially on our leadership roles in disaster risk reduction and response in internationally designated sites working in connection with Unesco. And also we create an integrative model of research, education, and community development, which will be broadly applicable to other wilderness areas worldwide. We are still continually working on this project. Thank you.
Oh, you mentioned about the smart park system, which I find very, very fascinating, because you are utilizing science, technology, engineering to really provide a way for disaster risk management, and also to teach people. So perhaps you could share with us, because in our audience we have a lot of young professionals in the region. You could share with us how science and engineering could contribute, building upon the smart park that you mentioned. How does science and engineering directly contribute towards the disaster risk reduction in heritage sites?
Okay, thanks for the question. Of course, science and technology are very important to strengthen the disaster risk reduction for heritage sites. In Sichuan province, actually each heritage site has a smart tourism center or site brain to improve the heritage sustainable management. I'm involved in 2 of the construction and evaluation of these centers. These site brains are full of scientific models for environment monitoring, tourism prediction, and disaster early warning and emergency management systems. They use a lot of frontier and innovative technologies, including 5G, Internet of Things for communication, big data, and also situation awareness systems, mapping, geographic information systems, location-based service, remote sensing, and drone technology for monitoring. Moreover, robotics, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, digital twins, building information modeling, augmented reality, virtual reality, and mixed reality are used for transform the complex process of disaster management. More importantly, Sichuan province is probably one of the best places to apply, development, and improve these technologies. It is one of the world's biodiversity hotspots, particularly for botanic biodiversity. Apart from the UNESCO World Heritage Site, Sichuan province got its name in many the categories of UNESCO protected sites, including the Biosphere reservoirs and used global geoparks. It is important to note that China has been a real leader in the global geoparks movement. We are committed to working with all of these categories of sites designated by UNESCO, especially with our students and You Inspire Alliance members from the other chapters. There could be a lot of place here for us to link to real new research project. Thank you.
Oh, you brought up the point of on smart brains, smart centers, augmented reality, Internet of Things. I think all of which are very advanced and using a lot of technology. But I understand, not all heritage sites would have that same capacity or that same technology in hand. But I mean, ideally, it would be nice if all places had all of those things for us to prepare ourselves. So I'll be following up from that question. So I would like to ask Dr. Tanot. You have worked a lot in the Langkawi geoparks. And how does or what are some of the science, engineering, and technology features which are being implemented at the geopark for disaster risk reduction?
Thank you so much, Sofian. And I would like to echo what Dr. Tian said. That is, technologies is one of those that we look forward to. Although in Langkawi, it is a natural area, we have to have much of it. Yeah, we consider it still in infancy because we still talk about it. Although some practices are not really done by our research center, but more like a partnering, either with the community or some society who want to do so. In this case, you might not see some experience from me, but I've been working with several universities who do such engineering. For example, in the case of Langkawi UNESCO Geopark, the engineering and technologies are mainly on the augmented reality, in which it is more like promoting tourism and less elements of DRR, but probably elements of DRR included in terms of their designing. For example, the one that slightly, I think much easier to relate is the cable car up to the mountains of Machinchang, in which we have less development. You use only a very kind of like basic framework to build the cable car, in which we partner, not we, but LADA in that case, the coordinator for Langkawi UNESCO Geopark, to work with outsiders who know about environmental challenges in that area to build a minimal infrastructure to accommodate the needs of the tourists. And also there's several hotels which is promote green hotels in Langkawi, either to minimize the impact of waste, which could be a disaster to a place, or as well as disaster to environment when there's too much tourists in our places, where all thing goes to the sea or goes to the main drainage system or the river system. So those kind of things that are being practiced in Langkawi. But I consider it still infancy because it's less than 5 to 10% of people who work in it. And they are still discussing on the electric car, which is ought to be brought to Langkawi to minimize the carbons, and still talking about building to minimize the car. Also, they would like to be added a simple trail, which is still in progress. We still brought it back to the coordinator of UNESCO Global Geopark. In other terms, which we are more success stories of Langkawi UNESCO Geopark is that note that Langkawi Research Center is a research center. It's almost imitate Lestari, or we have various backgrounds of people working there. I'm sorry that it's not just me, a geologist, but very few geologists, 1 or 2 or 3 of geologists who work there. But we are also partnering. We have friends of social science, biologies, economies who work in that Langkawi Research Center as well. So our work are looking into how we do various natural or anthropogenic hazard, and how we study not just the natural, but also anthropogenic hazard. And we're partnering in various agencies, either to monitoring system, particularly on the conservation part, environmental degradations, carrying capacities of touristic area, and other environmental issues. It is also include work that we include mapping of potential geohazard. In this case would be landslide, which is common in certain types of rocks, and sinkhole, which is common in Langkawi as well. And we're continuously recording changes in the environment, particularly water and air, as well as wildlife and flora. In the case of Langkawi, recording the wildlife of flora and fauna are very significant because it is an island ecosystem. It's very fragile, so it is important to do so. And we also, if one thing that become a craze to Malaysian, if it speak about environment, is planting mangrove. And then after the tsunami, we keep on doing so because Langkawi get affected by tsunami, the last in 2004, the biggest one in the region. So Langkawi get that high rise of tsunami. So the people realize the significance of keeping the mangrove. So we're planting a lot of mangrove in Langkawi, an area which is considered fragile. And also we involve the community to uh, to have nursery on these mangroves so that they keep on planting it, not just researcher. So the work is a mix between people and science of it, which is translated to the people. And the one thing that we also did is science to policy, in which we already come out with Langkawi geopark management plan. It's include DRR in it, which is ought to be implemented along with the local structure plan and Langkawi tourism blueprints. So that by far that I consider one of the how we put in DRR in Langkawi UNESCO local geopark. Back to you, Sophia.
I really like the answer, and and involving the community, involving the people on the ground. And just a bit background myself, I work for the International Science Council, and when we talk about science, we are talking both about the natural sciences and also the social sciences, because I think there's not one problem in the world that can be solved just by the natural sciences or the social sciences by itself. So it's you need both the natural and the social sciences, and it's very interesting that you and Dr. Tian are bringing the two different examples, where Dr. Tian is bringing more on the hard sciences using Internet of Things or using smart centers, whereas in Langkawi Geopark there is more involvement from the community and the social sciences. So both of which are very important and very crucial. And so moving back to Sachi at UNESCO, you mentioned previously that there are various sectors. You have the science sector, you have the cultural sector. So following up from some of the discussions brought up by Dr. Tanot and Dr. Tian, how does the different sectors in UNESCO work together for heritage sites for disaster risk reduction? Perhaps you could share with us some examples or from your end.
Thank you very much, Sufyan, for your question. And also it was very interesting to hear the examples from Dr. Tian and Dr. Tanot. Especially in UNESCO, the culture unit has been working actively on the heritage DRR because they already have several publications related to DRR. In 1998, there was a manual published called Risk Preparedness, a management manual for world cultural heritage. And they share the key principles. And then also after that, there are another documents developed and approved by the World Heritage Committee. So they have many active activities for heritage and DRR, especially in collaboration with other organizations as well, like including the World Bank. And also, maybe it is interesting to go back to the basic understanding, like why is it important for heritage sites to prepare for disaster? That would be also relevant to how we can apply those low-cost or latest technologies. So heritage for the heritage site or even other UNESCO designated sites, one of the key features is that some of the assets are irreversible. So once they are affected by disaster, maybe we cannot restore because if, for example, if it's heritage buildings, you need a specific technologies, specific materials, and it could be very costly. And also once damaged, you will lose, compromise the value of the heritage. So this is really important to focus on the preparedness. So in terms of that, applying science and technology and engineering, we should put enough focus on the preparedness. And also from a culture unit, they are advocating important concept, which is that heritage is not merely a victim of disaster, but heritage can facilitate the resilience of the community. So heritage also contains like a traditional indigenous knowledge, which could be useful for disaster risk reduction. And also heritage can be their identity for the community. So restoration of heritage or having heritage in the community can help recovery, social recovery and psychological recovery of the people in that areas. So it is important to note the active, positive role of the heritage as well. And also the UNESCO designated sites, they are in general demonstration sites. So they are demonstrating sustainable development in an inclusive and comprehensive manner. So they can demonstrate if it's a latest technology or if it's the community-based activities, but they have a huge network of UNESCO and can tell those knowledges to different communities in local and regional and global levels. Thank you.
I'm very fascinated about the point that you raised on heritage sites sometimes being the educating people themselves, in terms of architecture, in terms of the material. So from your experience, perhaps you could share some examples of where ancient old buildings are more sustainable to disasters compared to modern materials, because I understand sometimes in disasters, some of the modern materials that we used are not that good at withstanding disasters. So how do we learn from the old architectures?
Thank you for your question, Sofian. I think there are a lot of traditional architecture building technologies which we could still learn, and also disaster resilient, seismic resilient. There are some traditional architecture in Indonesia as well, and in Japan as well. For example, like in Japan, they don't they detach the pillars to the foundation so that it will be seismically resistant, or like it can just compromise the force of the earthquake. So there are a lot of mechanisms that we could learn from. Of course, there are a lot of latest technologies, but still, if you think of procuring the materials from the local site, or if you have limited budget, then it would be a good example on how you can apply the disaster resilient architecture in your site with a low cost. Sofian.
Sorry. So just to probably move back to Dr. Tanok, because I'm very fascinated about learning from traditional knowledge and traditional architecture. So examples from geoparks. Are there some examples from traditional knowledge that we could use or we could learn from?
Thank you, Sofian, for that question. I think that is one question that we try to answer in Malaysia, but already part of things that been practiced globally in geopark. Because when we do geopark, the heritage is not the heritage of just a group of people, but it is a heritage of the community. It is the local people who must have a sense of pride of the sites of the geosites they live on, or a beauty that they live on, because it's either influence their life and do things to their life. In the case of traditional knowledge, that what my team, particularly led by Dr. Sharina in Langkawi UNESCO Global Geopark, work with the local community. One thing that we have been working on is the art of making local house, which is why do the local people designing houses in the island in such a way, made of wood and with quite an interesting design. So derived from that, we translated into what kind of building that fit to be built in the island ecosystem. So that is the knowledge that we have been extracted from the community. And we have series of dialogue with community, not just about the architect, not just about the design, but also the plant. For example, some medicational plants, which is only unique to certain places to remedy some kind of sickness. It might not be, you might not be having it in a peninsula Malaysia. It only exists in certain ecosystem because of the rocks or because of the environments that allow it. Therefore, we recorded those things, not just for recorded purposes, but also part of a knowledge that transferred to generations. We partnering with one of the local hubsmen in Langkawi on that, in which he provide all the list of hub, which is available in the Langkawi Islands and how it being used through generations and promoted as part of the geopark products. And people who came to Langkawi Islands are also experience all those medicational plants as a part of food or as part of medication out of that curiosity. So such thing that evolved in geopark, in which we're using this indigenous knowledge, we call it, or local knowledge, being part of the heritage or giving heritage more heritage values, particularly in terms of culture and knowledge. We bring all those people in series of discussions. I remember those team of social sciences, and then they brought me in, and then I provide more like how to link each plant to different types of rocks. And where do they find it? So is it really linked to types of rocks, or is it separate, or how is it? So this kind of thing that we work out in Langkawi UNESCO Global Geopark.
That is certainly very fascinating, the role of indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge. And I think since most of our audiences today are youth, so I think that is just the natural segue for our conversation. Just for Dr. Tian, so you are part of Inspire Huaxia in China. You work with a lot of youth in terms of disaster risk reduction for heritage sites. So after hearing about the importance of indigenous knowledge, working with the community, working with the elderly, I think it is very clear. Sometimes there is a very big gap between the youth and also people working on heritage sites. So how do you encourage, or how do you see the role of youth in terms of disaster risk reduction for heritage sites?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. So this semester, actually, IDMR has initiated a new 3-year course for SOFAMOS, which is our new international innovation class for disaster risk reduction and emergency management. The innovation class have 37 students from 60 majors across both natural and social science. The students are working in teams of 8 DRR-related themes under supervision of both Chinese and international experts on each theme. So the 8 research themes like disaster mental health, mapping, disaster education, urban resilience, water disasters, and earth science, resilience for health care systems, post-disaster environment management. So the innovation class actually provide a base for us to really keep our chapter You Inspire Huaxia being active, productive, and highly interdisciplinary. We have 60,000 students in our university. Last Saturday, our dean, Professor Gretchen Kalonji, gave a comprehensive introduction of the You Inspire Alliance in our innovation class. We encourage our students to develop and conduct their own research projects under their chosen theme, and we will create as many as opportunities at the platforms as possible to bridge them with other You Inspire chapters. In fact, in the theme of water disaster and culture team is focused on the topic of heritage. The interactions of water, disaster risk reduction, and the protection of nature and culture heritage are complex, fascinating, and of vital importance for sustainable development. Water-related disasters pose a significant threat not only to the ecosystems of protected natural areas, but also to the intangible sites such as artistic traditions, local and traditional agricultural knowledge, performing arts, etc. Natural and cultural heritage are protected through various international agreements. Most prominent of which is UNESCO World Heritage Convention. Though there are other global sets of protected sites, such as biosphere reserves and geoparks. So the water, disaster, and culture team include 5 students from civil engineering, and ecology. They are led by Professor Kenzo Hiroki, is a professor from Japan, and Dr. Shinichi, who is graduated from MIT, and Dr. New Japan. They are looking at the Min River Basin, I mentioned before, from the Sichuan Basin, all the way up to the headwaters of Min River on the Tibetan Plate, and as the objective of the study. So the Min River and its tributaries contain a very large number of exciting heritage sites, and a lot of cultural diversities like Han Chinese, Qiang Asic, Hui Asic, and Tibet Asics, each with traditional water and DRR knowledge and practices. So the heritage site in Sichuan and in this area include the Dujiangyan irrigation systems, which is continuously working for more than 2,300 years, and the Leshan Giant Buddha, and the Wolong Biosphere Reserve, and Huang Natural Heritage Site, and Jiuzhegu Valley. So this research theme will use as its focus in Sichuan, the Min River and its tributaries, and will assess the interactions of water and culture from its headwaters on the Tibet Plateau through Dujiangyan irrigation systems. The team will investigate and initiate international collaborations with other river basins, which share such an extraordinary weather of nature and cultural heritage. With our new innovation class, we are integrating protection of heritage into the curriculums for undergraduate students in team-based interdisciplinary research. We would have very much welcome interest from the You Inspire chapters in working with our class on this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that a comprehensive answer on the importance of education, curriculum, for teaching the youth about all the important science and technology for disaster risk reduction for heritage sites. So next, I would like to also ask you, sometimes for youth, we learn more or we learn better from sharing of experience. And I understand that you were in Kathmandu after the 2015 earthquake, and it must have been a very chaotic moment after the earthquake. So perhaps you could share with some of the audience, what was your experience? What was it like being there after the earthquake?
Okay, thank you. I remember that the month I back to China from Japan in 2015, the Nepal earthquake happened. It's affect across Nepal side and China side. So I highly engaged in the response stage of the earthquake through supporting the rescue team from China side by providing disaster maps, information, and daily report to them. So the earthquake was occurred in April. I visited Nepal in December in the same year. After the field trip, I back to Chengdu and I decided to apply a research project. The title is about to build a youth collaboration platform for disaster education and to share the disaster risk reduction knowledge. So since 2015, I visited Nepal every year, except this year due to COVID. And also, we invited Nepal professors and students to visit Chengdu every year. Especially for students, we have 2 weeks long university communication program during summer holiday. So we invited and supported more than 40 excellent Nepal students in 3 years. So during the 2 weeks, they stay in Chengdu, and we invited famous professors in the DRR research field from all over the world, especially from Japan, UK, and so on. So the students from Nepal, Japan, UK, and China studied and worked together. They also learned from the field like Wenchuan earthquake memory sites and the museums, and also Zhujiangyan irrigation systems I mentioned before. So at Low, we are also attract Nepal scientists worked in IDMR, and also jointly apply for the DRR Research Fund, do research together, and also supervised the student in Nepal University and worked as a visiting faculty in Tribhuvan University. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
I think that's certainly very important. The point that you raised, that I think it's very important for people to understand that disasters are not contained within borders, and that there is a need for countries to work together, and especially youth. We need to be working together with other countries to solve, to better understand and better prepare for disasters. So thank you very much for raising that very important point. So I will next turn my attention to Dr. Sachi. So you are wearing both UNESCO and also You Inspire hat. And certainly you are inspiring a lot of other youth to work in disaster risk reduction, to work for probably in UNESCO. Probably you have some motivation or some experiences that you would like to share for youth on how they can know about how can they participate more in this field, and how they can contribute towards the disaster risk reduction for heritage sites.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Sufyan, for your question. For getting familiar with UNESCO's DRR UNESCO Designated Sites project, I would like to share some links so that you can find some of the surveys and some of the good practices, so that you can see how it actually looks like. And of course, there are a lot of opportunities for youth and young professionals to work with UNESCO sites through their research and maybe voluntary activities. And I would recommend you to contact with a national body which coordinates the UNESCO sites in your country, and also national commissions in your country. And also, if you are very based in a heritage city, and if you'd like to engage with like You Inspire and also UNESCO, please feel free to contact us. I believe that youth has a huge potential in this engaging with sites and also promoting DRR. There are a lot of youth-related programs in UNESCO for each UNESCO designated site. World Heritage also has a youth forum, and there is a MAB youth program for biosphere reserves, and then geoparks also have activities related to youth. So it will be a very good entry point for you to contact with those communities. Thank you, Sofian.
Thank you for bringing up and sharing with the audience some of the ways that they can be involved or contribute towards the disaster. So just to add up on some of the things, I mean, I understand that for a lot of youth, there is this, how do I say that? Sometimes you are not aware of what you are going to do when you start working. I say for myself, I come from my biomedical background, and I think whenever we are taught, it will always, if you do science, you become a scientist, you work in the lab. If you do engineering, you become an engineer and you build stuff. Or if you're a geologist, you learn geology and you do oil and gas or something like that. So from your experience working for UNESCO on disaster heritage sites, how did you find out, or how did you find the inspiration to continue to work in this field?
Thank you for your question. It is really a good point that people working in disaster fields actually came from different fields or have many different positions. But I think that is actually an ideal community, which all the people who are in a different jobs have an interest in DRR, even if it's not your main work. So that should increase the resilience of the community. And the heritage site is very unique in terms of it's really a physical site. In UNESCO work, we have a lot of networking projects, but it is very strong if you have a real place where you can work with and where you can engage with. So I think that is really a strong point for UNESCO sites to have some anchor for youth to engage. And also from the UNESCO sites, you could find the universities which is working on some scientific research in that site. And then you could also find some NGOs you can work together with. So I hope that this site will be a good also entry point for the youth to get involved in this DRR activities as well. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. And again, just to I really agree with the points that you raised, that it is very important to have the multidisciplinary inputs for disaster risk reduction. And just to follow up with that, for Dr. Tanot, you mentioned at the very beginning that you stumbled upon conservation geology because it was the time. And so similar questions to Dr. Sachi. So how do you inspire the younger generation to find what they're passionate about doing? And if it is in disaster risk reduction for heritage sites, how do they get the first step in? Because sometimes that is the most, I would say, the most challenging part or the most nervous part. So from your experience, probably you could share to your audience.
Thank you, Sofian. It's a very interesting question to answer. I would say first to all the successful young professionals, particularly geologists or those who work in multidisciplinary, I would say you are a game changer in whatever you do, because you will make decisions of what difference in your knowledge or in your subject in your work. I would say that because you can make decisions. If you being a researcher, you decide differently. If you a policy maker in the future, you have to decide one thing. So to enter into that, I would say, but I would like to remind you first about this, because this is about conservation geology, in which I'm passionate about. I would like to remind you that geology is underpinning life. It is something that underpinning life mean it is influence things that on it, the environment, the people who live with different types of geology setting and different types of rock setting. That's why people live by the mountains are different, or mountains of limestones are different from those of granite. Understanding that, and yet ignorance of it by, for example, we want to keep the air and the water clean, but we would rather have geology demolished or gone. Or, for example, some outstanding heritage of geological heritage are gone. I like to echo the words bring out by Dr. Sachi earlier, unreversible values. The unreversible values of geological heritage are immense that I cannot describe because you cannot duplicate it. You cannot make it in lab. You cannot do it, create different species or things like that. No, you cannot. It's gone. It's gone. So being a game changer, the choice is to, in the case of geological heritage or geology, is either to look into when you in a position that you have to make a decisions, either to keep balance between developments or exploiting geology for the economic benefit of the country, either extractions mainly, or to save some for the sake of it, memory of the earth. Or secondly, just preserve it totally because it is the memory of the earth and utilize it as a geopark or conservation area or as a man ambassador part of it and turn it into economic benefit as have been a great economic, a geopark is already become economic boom to certain country. China, Dr. Tian can be evidence to give evidence on this, in which China are really benefited from this geopark program, in which it's giving a boost of economy to the area, particularly the rural area, in which geopark brought in. So the choice is yours. And if you want to pursue the idea, you either join me in the institutions, dig in the research, either you can do one specific on geology or in the technology of DRR, or you can do the multidisciplinary. We offer those in our institute. And we're partnering with all our friends in global, include, yeah, where different subject, even in medicals, even in the biology, so basic science is common, but we are moving toward the technologies in the sector. Yeah. So I offer that to you. Do not hesitate to go through our website unless study. So you can start with that if you want to pursue the ideas of exploring it. Yeah. Back to you, Sophia.
Oh, thank you very much for the stark reminder that once these heritage sites are gone, that it is irreversible, as mentioned by a lot of people. And again, I think it's very important to emphasize that the youth or the younger generations will be the one that continue to inherit the world, and it is very important for us to to conserve the heritage sites, the culture, the ecology, the biodiversity, as was mentioned by all of our speakers during the whole talk. So I think I have learned tremendously during the whole talk, the whole discussion, and I am very thankful for all the three of the speakers that we have had today for their sharing of the knowledge. It is very fascinating that we have managed to get three speakers who are bringing the experience from three different backgrounds. We have Dr. Tian, who speaks more on the technology side, using the latest technology as smart centers, smart brains, the augmented reality, Internet of Things, to really emphasize the importance of science and in technology and engineering, in not just understanding disasters, but putting in place the measures to manage and to prevent a lot of the destruction to the heritage sites. And it's also fascinating, very good to have Dr. Tian or Dr. Tanot, my apologies, who is bringing the point of working with the community. That disaster risk reduction for heritage site is not just involving the geologists, not just involving the scientists, the engineers, but you need to work with the local communities. Work with the villager people in the village, work with the young generation, the stakeholders, because they are the ones. They are also the ones who are impacted, and they are also the ones who would benefit from a better management of heritage sites. And I think she raised a very important point that the discussion needs to, for it to be multidisciplinary. again, you cannot solve any issue by just having the discussion among scientists, among geologists, or among youth. For example, you need to have the discussion to be between geologists, between social scientists, between economists, between the local people. And I think therein lies the importance of communication. Going back to what Sachi mentioned, and that communicating what we have learned and communicating to the community is very important, because we can do a lot of research, we can understand the disasters, but if we do not communicate it to the people, people will not understand, and you will then not have a good mitigation, or you will not be able to prevent things from happening. So again, communication is very important. And going back to Dr. Sachi, who mentioned the very big role that UNESCO is playing in terms of heritage sites. I think everybody knows that protection of heritage sites is a very big part of what UNESCO is doing. You will see UNESCO heritage sites almost every part of the world. You have UNESCO towns and UNESCO cities. And so it is very important about how the different sectors of UNESCO are working together, not just the science sector, but also the culture sector, and also how youth, UNESCO are involving youth as well. So I think there is definitely a lot of potential for youth to be more involved in disaster risk reduction for heritage sites. The point was raised that again, there is a gap between the indigenous knowledge and what the youth are familiar with, and there is a need for the youth to better understand and better learn indigenous knowledge, indigenous architecture, so that we can better understand the places that we are living in, our cultures, and also to conserve all of these very important points, which, going back, is irreversible. So we need to work together. It is definitely something that there is a need for multidisciplinary discussion. And I'm very glad that we had this topic as one of our disaster risk reduction talks for this series. So again, I would like to thank all of our speakers for being with us. You have definitely shared a lot of experience. I have definitely learned a lot. And of course, we have a lot of questions from our participants, which unfortunately we do not have time to answer. But as mentioned by the by the MC, that we will answer those questions via email. So we will get back to you in terms of further questions. And so thank you to all of the speakers. Thank you to all of our audiences who have been with us for the past 90 minutes. Yeah, 90 minutes. And I've learned a lot, and I'm sure the audiences have learned a lot. So thank you very much. Back to you, Eviana.
Oh yes, thank you, Sofyan. Wonderful. Well, dear participants, we have finished with discussion of Let's Talk DRR Session 5. We thank you, Dr. Bingwe Tian, Dr. Tanot Unjah, and Dr. Sasi Sujoki for the insightful talk. We hope that our today's fruitful discussion on disaster risk reduction for heritage sites, natural and cultural heritage, biosphere reserve, and geopark could expand our knowledge and motivates all of us to contribute actively on disaster risk reduction action. Dear participants, this concludes our session 5 of Let's Talk DRR series. We will compile all the questions in the Zoom chat box, and the organizer will arrange for this question will be answered. I would like to remind all participants, if you are interested to get certificate of participation for this session, please check the chat box in Zoom to get the link for the questionnaire. If you submit questionnaire for the certificate, we will send you the certificate of participation electronically. The attendance and certificate form will only be open until 4:30 p.m. Jakarta's time. Well, don't miss our next interesting discussion with the expert in their field. Our next discussion will be held on next Friday, 18 December, 2 p.m. to 30 p.m. Jakarta's time, focusing on another Unesco's contribution to DRR Talk 6, Nature-Based Solution for Disaster Risk Reduction. We will have 3 prominent resource persons and moderator, Professor Sasbas Khan, Director UNESCO Office Jakarta as moderator, and then Dr. Irina Pavlova, UNESCO Headquarters Paris, and then Dr. Anissa Trianti, Inspire Indonesia, Postdoctoral Fellow Utrecht University Netherlands, and also Dr. Ranit Hatterjee, Inspire Alliance, Postdoctoral Fellow Kyoto University, Japan. Thank you very much all, and look forward to having you again next week, and have a great day. Bye-bye. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.